I want to spend some time talking about the case the Supreme Court is considering right now, having to do with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. It's about a Louisiana district that was designed to create a district so that a black person could get elected. And if the Supreme Court, as I predict, rules that this is a violation of the 14th Amendment, that could strike down a number of black and brown districts that were designed specifically to create districts where black and brown people could be elected to the House. The New York Times wrote, and I'm quoting them, Democrats would be in danger of losing around a dozen majority-minority districts across the South if the court strikes down part of the Voting Rights Act. End of quote. Stephen Miller, White House Chief Deputy, recently tweeted, how many people just realized that Dems had as many as 20 extra seats based on years of unconstitutional race-based gerrymandering, close quote. So the Supreme Court is going to rule, in essence, on whether or not these districts violate equal protection. The director of the ACLU, called the Voting Rights Project of the ACLU, supports these districts. And she said, and I'm quoting, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act has been a critical tool in safeguarding the promise that people of color can participate in our democracy on equal terms. I guess they forgot about somebody being elected named Barack Obama, but I digress. She continues, it has been our shield against discriminatory maps and our answer to laws designed to suppress the vote. Congress passed the Voting Rights Act with overwhelming bipartisan support, she says, and reauthorized it again and again because our leaders understood a fundamental truth. You cannot cure discrimination by pretending it doesn't exist, end of quote. Wow. And check out what the lawyer who's arguing the case before the Supreme Court said. Her name is Janai Nelson. She said this, and I'm quoting, it was clear that regardless of party, white Democrats were not voting for black candidates whether they were Democrats or not. We know that there's such a significant chasm between how black and white voters in Louisiana vote that there's no question that even if there is some correlation between race and party, that race is a driving factor, close quote. Again, in short, she's arguing before the Supreme Court that white voters in Louisiana won't vote for a black candidate, whether that candidate is a Republican or a Democrat. Now, I wrote about this nearly 20 years ago in my first book, The 10 Things You Can't Say in America, because there were a couple of districts that were struck down by the Supreme Court that were designed specifically to become race-based districts, and that race was a predominant factor, and the Supreme Court back then struck them down. There was a case called Shaw versus Reno in 1993, another one called Miller versus Johnson in 1995. Now, after the Miller decision that struck down 4 southern districts that were now held by blacks, Elaine Jones of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund said, and I'm quoting her, the noose is tightening. Jesse Jackson cried, ethnic cleansing. Another Legal Defense Fund lawyer said that once this decision goes through, once these 4 districts that have been now majority-minority districts are turned to majority-white districts, the Black Congressional Caucus, quote, could meet in the back seat of a taxi cab, close quote, meaning it'll be reduced so small that the Black Congressional Caucus could meet in the back of a taxi cab. Well, 3 of the 4 black congresspersons whose district went from majority black to majority white decided to run for re-election. All 3 got re-elected. 1 chose not to run and therefore, of course, did not get re-elected. A columnist named Jeff Jacoby wrote about this back in 1996. And he quoted the NAACP's Elaine Jones, head of their legal defense fund, who said, "Today is one of the saddest days in the history of American law," referring to that case in 1996. At the ACLU, a guy named Laughlin McDonald foresaw a, quote, Congress that is increasingly white at a time that the nation is becoming increasingly diverse. As Jacoby said, for all the chicken littling, the sky never fell. There were 55 blacks and Hispanics in that Congress, and there'll be 55 in the one following. One of them, named Eddie Bernice Johnson, whose district in Dallas went from majority black to majority white, was reelected with 55% of the vote. Sheila Jackson Lee's district went from majority black to majority white, and she won re-election 77% of the voters. Fast forward to now. Byron Donalds, Florida, is from a majority white district. Wesley Hunt from Texas, black Republican, as is Byron Donalds, is in a majority white district in Texas. Burgess Owens, black Republican from Utah, is in a majority white district. John James, Michigan, majority white district. Tim Scott, of course, is U.S. Senator from South Carolina. South Carolina has a substantial black population, but in no way is it the majority. And then you've got all these mayors from New York, from L.A., from Chicago, America's three largest cities, all of which have black mayors, none of which has a majority black population. And then, of course, you've got Barack Obama, 2008, whose election and re-election could not have taken place without substantial non-black votes. And I mentioned this the other day. 2007, when Obama was competing against Hillary Clinton for the nomination, and on the Republican side, Mitt Romney was competing against John McCain for the nomination, Gallup asked whether or not you would not vote for a black person, referring to Barack Obama. 5% of Americans said they would not vote for a black person. 11% of Americans said they would not vote for a female, referring to Hillary. 24% said they would not vote for a Mormon, referring to Mitt Romney, and 42% said they would not vote for somebody who would be 72 years old when he became president. Obviously, people's attitude about age has now changed given Donald Trump. But at the time, 42% of Americans said they would not vote for somebody who's as old as John McCain. In other words, Obama had a lower hurdle than did these other three more experienced non-black politicians. Is this thing on? Yet you have the lawyer before the Supreme Court arguing before the Supreme Court from the NAACP telling the court that white voters in Louisiana will not vote for a black person, whether that black person is a Republican or a Democrat. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Bobby Jindal, whose parents are from India, become a senator from Louisiana and also governor from that state? Given the obvious racism among white voters that the NAACP is arguing about before the Supreme Court, how did that happen? In California, in LA rather, where I am right now, the percentage of blacks in the city is less than 9%. Yet Los Angeles just elected a black female for mayor. How did that happen? And in the late 90s, Los Angeles voted 4 times for a black mayor, Tom Bradley. How did that happen?